People who left their partner the day of the wedding, what happened? Story 1. So, check this out. The drama unfolded the day after the wedding. It was a gorgeous ceremony with over 250 guests, featuring these college sweethearts in their mid-20s whose parents were tight in the same Southern social scene. They were super religious, so everyone made a big deal about how they waited to tie the knot. Fast forward to their honeymoon flight the next day, and the groom turns to my older cousin, the bride, and drops the bomb. This was a mistake. Then he just totally clammed up and wouldn't say a word to her. They landed in Tahiti, and guess what? She hopped on the next flight home while he apparently stayed in their honeymoon suite and, well, got busy with a bunch of other chicks. I didn't check this out myself. Family gossip can get wild. A month later, he came crawling back, but she was way too embarrassed. She'd spent that whole month returning wedding gifts, sending thank you notes, and dealing with all the mess while he was out partying. He just wasn't ready and felt pressured or whatever. They got an annulment, and now it's super awkward when they see each other at alumni events, LOL. But hey, she's happily married now with 3 adorable kids, so I guess he just cleared the way for the right one to come along. You really never know what's happening behind the scenes. What seems perfect from the outside can be a totally different story for the folks involved. Story 2. So, my bro went to this engagement shindig, and it was all good. Nothing too wild or crazy. Fast forward 3 months to the wedding, and he rolls up, only to see a totally different bride. Same dude, same date, same invite. Just a brand new bride. No clue what happened. Story 3. My wife's fam has this wild tale from the early 1900s. So, there was this couple who mostly chatted through letters. On their wedding day, the bride freaked out a little. The fam was all stressed about what to do when her sister jumped in and said, "I'll marry him." The groom thought it over for a bit and was like, "Why not?" The wedding went on like nothing was out of the ordinary. And rumor has it, they were happily married for over 50 years and had a big, joyful family. Story 4. So, check this out. So, it's not me, but the bride's bestie thought it was the perfect moment during the wedding to spill the tea that the bride was secretly expecting. Here's the twist. The groom was super religious and had decided to wait until marriage, and the bride was totally on board with that. They hadn't done the deed yet, but it turns out she'd been playing around for most of their relationship because of this. I guess she was planning to wait until after they finally hooked up to tell him the kid was his. This all blew up into a wild scene where the groom's parents were totally freaked out, thinking he had broken his promise to stay pure. Meanwhile, the bride's fam was popping champagne over the news, and both the bride and groom looked like they'd just seen a ghost. This is some next-level drama that could easily be a reality TV show plot. Like, who needs a soap opera when you've got weddings going off like grenades? Imagine being the groom, standing there, thinking you're about to pledge eternal love, and then, boom, your whole world just gets flipped upside down by someone who thought surprise pregnancy reveal was a solid wedding gift. And honestly, this bride must have been plotting her grand reveal for a while. Talk about a plot twist nobody asked for. Can't wait to see how this one gets wrapped up in the comments section. Keep that popcorn ready, folks. Story 5. So, my buddy went through this wild situation like 20 years ago. She was engaged to this dude from a super wealthy family. The wedding was set in California, but they were living up in Seattle. Super fancy, really pricey. But man, her future mother-in-law was a total piece of work. Right at the start of the reception, the MIL rolled up and whispered some nasty stuff to her, thinking she'd just take it like a champ. But she snapped and families got involved, and that night, she hopped on a plane back to the PNW. Her fam had already started packing up her stuff from the apartment that same evening. She never talked to him again. Story 6. I'm not sure if this counts, but about 6 years back in March, my fiancé and I decided to hit pause on our wedding. So on the weekend that was supposed to be the big day, he took off to hang with his parents, leaving me home alone. We lived about an hour away from our folks, and we didn't have any cell service or Wi-Fi, not even a landline. His parents went wild on Facebook celebrating him, not tying the knot with me, and throwing a party for his new girlfriend, who was actually a friend he always told me not to stress over. My mom caught wind of all those posts, drove out to where I was, and said, "Hey sis, what's the plan here?" I took a blazing hot shower and sobbed. Then we packed up my things and left him a note on the dining table with the ring. Later, he hit me up asking, "Is this what you really want?" I shot back with, "Nah, but it's what I gotta do." Story 7. Not me, but my best bud. I was all set to be his best man at his wedding. While I was planning his bachelor party, I hit up some of our old pals to invite them. One dude who showed up, we hadn't seen in like a decade, asked who he was marrying, and I told him. He went totally quiet for a sec and then said, "Dude, I just hooked up with her a few weeks ago." I thought he was messing around, but then he sent me a pic. That was the toughest convo I've ever had to have, and it was only like 12 hours before the wedding. Story 8. So, about a week before the wedding, my husband got this weird text from a buddy of his that said something like, "If I'm in Key West on Friday, the wedding's not happening," which kinda hinted he was having some doubts. But then, we saw on social media that the rehearsal dinner went down the night before, and this guy was there, so we figured he had moved on from whatever was bothering him. Since we had family visiting and weren't planning on going to the wedding anyway, my husband shot him a congrats message later that day. The dude replied from Key West, but didn't actually show up for the ceremony. His excuse? He claimed it was because she wouldn't sign the prenup. But the truth was, he was already talking to someone else. Story 9. We dubbed it the Not a Wedding. It was a super chill gathering in the backyard, and when we got there, one of the groom's relatives pulled us aside and quietly let us know that the wedding was canceled, but they had tons of food, so we should dig in. Apparently, that very morning, the groom found out that the bride had a little fling with the stripper at her bachelorette bash. His family said they had already shelled out a bunch of cash for the party, so they figured they'd just play it cool and tell everyone when they showed up. It was one of the most cringy situations I've ever experienced, because the groom was just sitting there looking totally down, while folks were trying to lift his spirits. We nibbled a bit out of politeness, and then bounced out of there. Classic. Only at a family gathering do you find out the wedding's off, but hey, grab a plate while you're at it. I mean, that's a power move by the bride. Who knew that wedding drama could double as a buffet? Imagine being the groom, just heartbroken and then going, "Well, at least I can eat my feelings." And let's be real, that's probably the most memorable thing to happen in that yard for at least a decade. I'd call that a win if I was getting free food out of the deal. Story 10. So, my cousin had this quick backyard wedding, right? She totally had a change of heart after a little spat that morning, but my uncle went ahead and grilled up some BBQ, and we all just ended up chilling together, like usual. They ended up tying the knot for real the following weekend. But honestly, it's not the craziest story ever. Fast forward 22 years and 3 kids later, and they're still going strong, so that's pretty cool. Story 11. So, not on the actual day or anything, but my mom's first marriage was a total disaster and only lasted 13 days. The guy was really messed up, kept her trapped in the apartment, and was super abusive. Luckily, she managed to get his mom to come and help her out and take her to a safe place. Story 12. I've got a rougher story about this. A relative of mine got hitched, then they ended up expecting a little one. Everything seemed chill at first, but on the big day when the baby was born, the guy decided he didn't want to be a dad and just dipped out, never to be found again. He didn't even get to see the kid. Story 13. So, my sister's wedding saga. This all went down about 2 weeks before the big day. While the groom was off partying with the guys, my sister jetted to another state to get closure with her ex. But the groom wasn't exactly winning any awards either. He went MIA during the bachelor party, and it turned out he was trying to hook up with girls and dabble in some not-so-great stuff as his last fling before tying the knot. My boyfriend at the time was at the bachelor bash and told me that when the guys went back to the hotel to find the groom, they stumbled upon some pretty sketchy stuff, like signs of a wild night with a lady and some questionable substances. The groom was bouncing around like he was on cloud 9, but got shot down by girls left and right. So I guess he was just trying to grab whatever he could. LOL. Once all the craziness came out, my mom thought it'd be a great idea for my sister to still go through with the wedding and just hit up couples counseling. Spoiler alert, that didn't sit well at all. My dad, having already shelled out cash for the venue and food, figured we'd still throw a party there, just without my sister. My boyfriend, who's now my husband, jokes that we call it the non-wedding. LOL. Such a blast. They were together for 4 years and engaged for 2, so that's a solid 6 years. Less than a year later, the groom ended up marrying a girl he'd been cheating on my sister with the whole time they were engaged, and get this, He popped the same engagement ring on her that my sister had for 2 years. Super tacky, if you ask me. Meanwhile, my sister ended up marrying the ex she went to visit in another state. Edit. Oops, I meant to say engaged instead of dating. Story 14. So, this wild story went down at a place where I was working. The groom totally vanished right after the ceremony and before the reception. The bride was running around like crazy trying to find him and finally stumbled upon him in the accessible restroom, leaned over the sink and getting it on with his best man. She freaked out, smashed her wine glass in his direction, and just walked out. Story 15. So, my pops ditched his fiancée at the altar. And nah, it wasn't my mom. This was ages ago. From what he shared, their relationship was super toxic, and the drama really ramped up while they were planning the wedding. He actually gave her a heads up that he was close to calling it quits. She shot back that he didn't have the guts to go through with it. So when the officiant asked him if he wanted to marry her, he straight up said, nope. She, totally understandable honestly, was furious. And her crew tried to throw down with my dad, who made a quick getaway with his best buddy. Fast forward a few months, and they did tie the knot, but it didn't last long before they split up. That's a plot twist that definitely beats any rom-com I've seen. Like, imagine being the bride just standing there, fully dressed up and ready to go, while your fiancé is casually dropping nah at the altar. Talk about a mic drop moment. Kinda savage, but also like, maybe he should have just bailed a little earlier. Toxic relationships and wedding drama are such a mess, but hey, better to say no there than regret it later, I guess. Story 16. So, not on the actual day, but a girl I used to work with had this huge church wedding, and then she jetted off to Hawaii for her honeymoon. One night, her husband totally went off on her, but she managed to escape and called her dad. He hopped on the first flight to Hawaii, brought her back home safe, and she ended up getting an annulment. Story 17. A buddy of mine and his coworker. So, his fam is from Europe and they've got some fancy estates. She hails from Kentucky. Families fly in from all over to this island mansion for a week of partying. They tie the knot with the family priest at their church. Big bash afterward. His family dropped a ton of cash, probably around $1 million. After the reception wraps up, they jet off to Spain for their honeymoon. The next morning, he steps out onto the balcony and whistles at the flower guy in the plaza to bring some blooms up. He shouts his room number and hops in the shower. She, not getting it, steps out and spots 3 ladies walking through the plaza. She thinks he's whistled at them and given his room number out. So she packs her stuff, storms off, and leaves him in the hotel. He comes out of the shower to find her MIA and the flower dude waiting for cash. He pays the guy, thinking she's just running to the front desk. But then, half an hour later, he realizes his phone's gone, and so is her luggage. He calls his brother to ring his phone and then to reach her. She's ignoring the calls. Finally, he gets her mom on the line, and she goes off on him for whistling at those girls. He tries to clear things up, but her mom calls him a cheater. He never sees her again. No divorce because they never filed the marriage certificate. She keeps the rings, including his grandma's diamond. She posts wedding pics on social media. But when he gets back to the US, she's already moved out of their shared place and vanished. It's the wildest story ever. They were married for less than 18 hours. They ended up in legal battles over those wedding and engagement rings for 2 whole years. Story 18. Close call story. My dad's best dude really put in the effort to talk him out of tying the knot. He knew the bride way better than my dad ever did. Fast forward 15 years of yelling at each other, and 2 kiddos, hey there. And they ended up splitting up and never speaking again. So here's the thing. Dad's best man clearly had some insider info, and it's wild that no one took him seriously. Like, dude probably saw the red flags waving like a flag football game and was like, please, I'm trying to save you. Fast forward 15 years of screaming and 2 kids later, and they're just living the sitcom version of what not to do. It's both tragic and kinda hilarious, like the universe was trying to throw some serious shade. Guess that's what happens when you ignore the people who actually care. Classic. Story 19. So, I wasn't the main dude, but I was the best man. The whole vibe with the bride's super religious fam was just off, you know? My buddy the groom is Muslim and black, and while her fam was usually nice, they'd drop comments like, well, good luck with whoever you end up marrying, right in front of him. even after they were engaged. Then, out of nowhere, she just didn't show up. Her and her whole fam ghosted us and didn't even RSVP. They haven't chatted since. She ended up marrying some blonde guy within 6 months and now lives in, drumroll please, rural Alabama. Story 20. So, my sis-in-law decided to call off her wedding just a month and a half before the big day because she was dealing with some serious depression. It was rough for everyone, but her fiancé totally got that. It wasn't because she didn't want to marry him. She just wasn't feeling happy with life at that moment, and it wasn't the right time to tie the knot. They're still going strong, have 2 kids now, and are living their best lives. Story 21. So, I've got this friend who totally believes in signs from above. About a week before her wedding, she hit up church to pray for a solid marriage. While she was praying, the place got all gloomy because a cloud rolled in and blocked the sun, making it pretty dim inside. She took that as a huge sign and decided to call off the wedding, cutting ties with the guy right after telling him it was done. Everyone on her team had her back, but they couldn't help but chuckle at her reason. Fast forward a year, and it turns out he was hiding a serious gambling problem and a mountain of debt. He even forged her name on some bogus loan papers claiming she owed him and tried to hustle her family by saying they were on the hook for it too, when she wouldn't give him the time of day. Story 22. Not the day of, but a couple days later. So 2 days after I tied the knot, once all the wedding guests had bounced, my partner just vanished. I couldn't find him for a full 24 hours. Turns out he was off doing an all-night ayahuasca ceremony with his yoga instructor, who he was also, getting cozy with. He finally strolled in after being MIA all day and dropped the bomb saying, "I don't love you anymore." On that same day, I stumbled upon boxes of her stuff in the garage. He was already making plans to move her into our place. Honestly, I have no idea why he let me go through with the wedding in the first place. It was really tough on me and my family, especially since they flew in for the big day. They ended up getting married a couple of months later. Guess this had been brewing for a while. Now they're divorced, so there's that. Edit. Just adding a few more details. Story 23. So, my cousin Shay was the one who pulled this off. There was this chill spot tucked away behind some trees at the wedding venue. Shay, the bridal squad, and the photographer thought it'd be a good idea to stroll down the cute stone path back there to snap some nice pics. When they rounded the corner, they walked in on the groom, getting a little too cozy with the best man, right as he was, finishing up. They were so far away that they didn't even clock the group standing there, totally stunned. Shay wasn't having any of that, so she kicked him and his crew out. But we still had a blast at the party afterward. It's funny because she ended up meeting her now hubby at the reception. He was the DJ. He mentioned that, believe it or not, hookups at weddings with someone who's not the future spouse happen way more than people think. Edit. Just fixing some typos. So, plot twist of the century, right? Like, imagine being all cute and Pinterest perfect at a wedding, and then you stumble onto the hottest of messes. I can just picture Shay's face. Like, am I in a rom-com or a horror movie right now? Honestly, that's the kind of drama that makes family reunions way more interesting. 1010 would definitely tell at future gatherings. Can't wait for the wedding video. Hope they got that on film. Story 24. So, this isn't my tale, but one from a buddy of mine. She was all set to tie the knot, and her mom was heading to the wedding when she got into a really bad accident and sadly didn't make it. The bride decided to call off the wedding, and as far as I know, she never set a new date with the groom. The heartbreak of losing her mom right before the big day was just way too much to handle. Story 25. So, this thing happened to a buddy of mine. That kind of friend who you really vibe with, but you're not super tight. Anyway, I couldn't make it to her wedding, so I just wanted to reach out and give her a shout out afterward. To keep it short, her wedding crew had to bounce back the same night because the groom's side, his fam, was asking for more cash for the dowry. Both the bride and groom are doctors, by the way. She and her fam were actually relieved they saw their true colors before tying the knot. Dowry-related issues are a huge problem in our country. Now she's happily married and has this adorable little girl. Just to clarify, dowry deaths happen when brides get seriously harmed or even worse after they marry. It usually goes down when the groom's side thinks they can score a better deal, so they end up treating the bride really badly to make it happen. It was such a big issue in India back in the 80s that the government had to step in and make a law. If a married woman dies under weird circumstances within the first 10 years, it gets looked into as a dowry situation. Often, brides are pressured to bring in more cash from their families even after the wedding. And just for some cultural context, even though dowry is tied to Hindu customs, my friend is Muslim. Also, I know a Catholic friend whose marriage fell apart over dowry stuff. It's a tough situation in our country, where misogyny seems to unite us all. Story 26. My sister got ditched right before the wedding. He just freaked out. She was totally crushed, but she ended up marrying an awesome dude. They've got 2 amazing kids, a gorgeous house, and both kids are living their best lives now. Meanwhile, that other guy hasn't really done much at all with his life. Story 27. I heard about someone who bailed on their honeymoon. They were in Italy, and something went down. She was super freaked out and kept her passport tucked under her pillow, so he couldn't snag it from her. That was over 20 years ago, and she's totally moved on. I never figured out what actually went down because I moved away and kind of lost contact. This is definitely not the typical honeymoon vibe you expect, right? Like, you go to Italy for romance, not to be hiding your passport like it's some sort of top secret document. Sounds like a horror movie setup. Imagine just chilling in a villa, and then suddenly it's like, surprise anxiety. It's wild how some people can just carry that kind of weight for years, though. Glad she moved on, but damn, I hope she's okay. Life really hits different for some people, and not in a good way. Story 28. I was working as a bartender at a wedding. The groom got totally wasted. Even after I stopped serving him, he couldn't help but snag drinks from others. Later on, he ended up making out with a tipsy bridesmaid, basically right in front of the bride. She smacked him and stormed off. It was so messy, but honestly, I was here for it. Story 29. I should have bounced the day of the wedding, but I actually stuck around for 40 hours after. I'll keep it short and sweet, but basically, my ex was super toxic and abusive, both mentally and physically, in the 6 months leading up to the big day. We eloped a year earlier and had planned a wedding party to celebrate our 1-year anniversary. So, my ex got totally hammered at the rehearsal dinner and didn't want to come home at first. When he finally did, I was having a panic attack, and he just sneered and said, "Well, maybe you should just go to the hospital." Then he did a line of something and headed back out with his buddies to a strip club. He rolled in around 3 a.m. and started yelling at me for almost an hour while I was in bed, shaking and crying, just trying to get him to let me sleep. He kept yanking the covers off and telling me how awful I was. On the wedding day, I just kinda zoned out. I was way too embarrassed to call the whole thing off. The day after the wedding, he pulled the same stunt, and by Monday morning, I packed up my dog and my stuff and dipped. Oh, and here's a fun fact. My ex hired pole dancers dressed like unicorns for our wedding reception and blew about $800 on some not-so-great stuff the month before. He only did that once in the 3.5 years we were together, so it wasn't a regular thing. Then he had the nerve to say he couldn't even buy me a ring. Story 30. So, we were together for 4 years, just 2 weeks away from closing on a custom-built house, and about a month from tying the knot. We'd been in therapy the whole time, dealing with his past issues and intimacy stuff, and I finally had this light bulb moment in one of those sessions that made me realize things weren't going to change. I thought I could stick it out, but he wouldn't hook up with me. He never called me beautiful, and he didn't really care about my life. Like, I wrote a book for a college class while we were together, and he didn't even know what it was about. Just one example. Anyway, walking away from him in the house ended up being one of the best decisions I've made in my 34 years. I ended up spending $23,000, but honestly, it was totally worth it. So, in short, I bailed at the last minute, and it turned out to be the best choice ever. Story 31. Been together for 14 years, but only married for 14 days. She ended up catching feelings for a coworker and wanted to figure out her own vibe. And honestly, we dove into dating way too early. We were both just 14. We had some good times and really loved every moment while it lasted. She seems happy now, but I still find myself missing her. Story 32. I totally should have bounced, but I didn't. He decided to skip our wedding night to party with his buddies and do some stuff until 5 a.m. I was 2 years clean at that point, so I ended up hitting the hay all by myself, not even knowing where my now hubby was. Back then, I thought he just wanted to catch up with some friends he hadn't seen in ages, but a couple of years down the line, it hit me that I was never really his main focus. Fingers crossed, the divorce is getting wrapped up soon. Story 33. I really admire anyone who figured out something was off and decided to bounce on their wedding day. It's way too common to see people stuck in the toxic relationships just because they don't know how to escape, even when they can feel something isn't right. That takes some serious guts to pull the plug on a wedding. Like, I can barely decide what pizza to order, and these people are out here making life-changing decisions. Kudos to anyone who recognizes that feeling deep down and just says, nah, I'd rather be single than miserable. It's honestly wild how many people get trapped in toxic situations just because they feel stuck. Respect to those who have the strength to walk away. Seriously. It's like breaking up before the worst kind of Netflix series can even start. Story 34. My bestie got hitched to a pilot. The very next morning, they jetted off for their honeymoon in Southeast Asia. Once they touched down in Singapore, she got an email from a girl in Colombia who was engaged to the same dude. Since he often flew to Colombia, it kinda added up. The email had a bunch of pics to back it up. Turns out the other girl found out because she spotted the wedding pics on social media. It was totally heartbreaking. She had to get off the plane, grab her bags, and deal with her husband while crying and arguing. She called her folks, and they set her up with a different hotel and booked her a flight home for the next day. As if that wasn't enough, she found out she was pregnant 3 weeks later. So now she's stuck dealing with this jerk for life. It's just a rough situation all around. She's an amazing person, and she definitely didn't deserve what happened. I sometimes think about how easy it is for someone's life to go sideways just because they picked the wrong partner, even when there aren't any obvious red flags. Story 35. I didn't, but my cousin sure did. She discovered he was being unfaithful, like right on the morning of the wedding. She mentioned that strutting out in her dress was super scary, but it was honestly the best choice she ever made. The fam was totally blown away, but she's doing great now. Story 36. A buddy of mine shared a story that's always stuck with me. It went down in the early 70s, so this dude was cruising around LA and picked up 2 girls who were hitchhiking. They hit it off and started dating. After a year, one of them moved in with him. They even started planning a wedding, and his fam from Detroit came out for it. Everything was set. Both families and friends were all seated. The whole processional was done, and the wedding march kicked off. But then, the church doors stayed shut. After a few super awkward moments, they finally creaked open. And it was just her dad standing there. He says, "Sorry, she had to use the bathroom. It'll be a sec." Eventually, her mom decides to check on her, but she's totally MIA. The only thing they found was her wedding dress back at their place. He was crushed. He told me he just sat there on the altar steps waiting. When he discovered the dress, he and his best man just went on their honeymoon and stayed buzzed the whole time. By the time he got back, all her stuff was gone. No note, no text, nothing. Just poof, she was gone. Fast forward 18 months, and she shows up at his door, crying, begging him to marry her. He said, "Slamming that door in her face without saying a peep was one of the best moments of my life. By then, I was over it and moved on." He was such a solid guy and lived a crazy life with a bunch of wild twists, like getting ditched at the altar. He was a Navy SEAL too, woke up in a body bag in Vietnam because they thought he was done for. After he healed up, he was back home and heading to his first day at a job after service. It was a stone workspace where he was gonna polish marble. But in the parking lot, he just couldn't bring himself to get out of the car. He went back home, and his mom said a buddy had just called. His friend's band had just signed with Motown, and they wanted him to join them in LA. He ended up being a backup and harmony singer for Rare Earth, the 70s band known for Get Ready and I Just Wanna Celebrate, the first all-white rock band signed with Motown. He was, Story 37. Yo, do I have a wild story for you? So, my close buddy had this wedding, right? She and her dude had been together for like 9 years, but honestly, their relationship was more about convenience than anything else. They didn't really vibe on anything. On the big day, she was totally freaking out, saying she wasn't feeling it and didn't want to go through with it. Everyone around was like, "Chill, it's just pre-wedding jitters." They went ahead and tied the knot. Everything looked pretty chill at first, but literally the next day she realized she was not feeling the whole marriage thing anymore. They never sent in their marriage paperwork, so they figured they weren't really married. A few months later, he packed up and moved out, and they went their separate ways. Fast forward about a year, and her ex gets a new girlfriend who wants to get married. Out of the blue, she gets a text from him saying, "Hey, guess what? Turns out someone, maybe the efficient, mailed in the paperwork, and we are actually married." This all went down in 2019, and she just found out last month that she's technically divorced from him. It's hilarious because she's been with someone new for 2 years now and is expecting a baby with him, so I can't help but joke about her getting pregnant by someone who isn't her, legally, husband. Story 38. Kinda related, my sister is super bossy, kind of a drag, and really controlling. She was set to marry this quiet, kinda chill military dude. The only thing he wanted before the wedding was for her to get that tattoo of her ex's name removed before they tied the knot. She was clearly messing with him by dragging her feet and delaying it. I honestly thought she was just gonna steamroll over his request, but then I found out he actually left his last fiancée at the altar. My sister totally knew this. At a family dinner the night before the big day, he casually said, "Well, you've got like 16 hours to get that tattoo gone." And then switched topics like it was no big deal. Not gonna lie, it was kind of hilarious seeing her walk down the aisle with that lace brushing against her freshly zapped backside. Your sister sounds like a piece of work, like the "I'm going to marry you but also make you regret every life decision" vibe. That guy must have thought he signed up for a fairy tale and got a reality show instead. And honestly, who plays chicken with a tattoo removal? That's some next level commitment to either stubbornness or drama. It's like, surprise, you thought you were marrying a person, but you're actually marrying a series of power struggles. Hope he at least gets some good story material out of this. Story 39. So the couple had their friends, co-workers, and pretty much everyone their families knew invited to the reception the night before. But the actual church wedding the next day was just for family. The groom was all about the party, but totally bailed on the wedding itself. The bride's mom was super pumped about organizing something special and making it a 2-day celebration. They were supposed to jet off on their honeymoon right after the church ceremony. The bride's family cared a lot about how things looked, so the embarrassment hit even harder. Story 40. My sis and her first hubby. Dude totally bailed on her at the courthouse. When she reached out, he was like, "Nah, I'm not feeling it." A few months later, they got back together and eventually tied the knot. They were hitched for about 6 years until he tragically lost his life in a car crash on his way home from work. Their relationship was always pretty messy. Story 41. So, my brother pulled this move. The wedding day rolls around, and guess what? My bro is MIA. My other brother, who was part of the wedding crew, texts me saying, "Meet me on the stairs." So I go, and he's like, yeah, Matt's not coming." Great. Now I have to head back into the bridal suite where I'm not just the groom's sister but also the maid of honor, and I gotta break the news to all the girls that the groom is ghosting us. Cue the meltdowns, obviously. We ended up throwing a big bash anyway since a ton of cash was already on the line. Meanwhile, my brother was off to Atlantic City with our third bro and a couple of his buddies. I was on bride watch for the next 3 days because the bride was not handling it well. Turns out she cheated, and my brother found out and tried to bail a few days before, but she threatened to harm herself if he did. So, this was the route he took. The bride's mom even tried to sue my brother for the wedding costs, but backed off when she got hit with proof of the affair. Story 42. A colleague was ditched just 3 days before her wedding. Her fam was all set to fly in from abroad. They ended up getting back together after about a year or so and decided to give it another shot with the wedding. But then, a week before the big day, he bailed again. Why? He just couldn't handle it. That's rough. 3 days before the wedding, that's like final boss level of commitment issues. I can't even imagine the stress for both sides, especially with family flying in and everything. Rekindling after a year just to bail again? At that point, he should just stick to casual dating or get a goldfish. Like, bro, if you can't handle it, just say so. But honestly, this is just peak relationship drama. Might as well throw in some reality TV cameras for good measure. Story 43. Not quite at the altar, but close enough. Over 50 years ago, my mother-in-law was engaged to a rich dude from a pretty influential fam. They were both religious and decided together to hold off until marriage. The wedding went down in a huge church in front of a bunch of people, and right after, they jetted off to Europe for their honeymoon. But once they got to the hotel and were finally alone, he dropped a bombshell on her. I can't do this. I thought I could. But I'm not in love with you. I'm not attracted to you. I'm gay. So she hopped in a cab to the airport that same night and waited for the first flight home. She showed up at her parents' place out of nowhere, told them she was getting an annulment, and wouldn't say another word about it for the rest of the summer. Eventually, the whole story came out, but she was totally heartbroken. Then, about a year later, she met the love of her life, and the best guy I've ever known, besides my husband, at the pediatric hospital where she worked. Story 44. So, it wasn't actually on the wedding day, but my cousin decided to call off the whole thing. We got this email about a month ahead of time saying it was on hold. My cousin was dealing with some stuff and later found out he had MS and Parkinson's. But when the wedding date rolled around, guess what? His ex-fiancée popped up as a match for me on a dating site. Wild, right? Story 45. In my small hometown, there was this dude I knew who was supposed to be the best man at a wedding. On the big day, Lyndon headed out to the farm where the groom was doing his thing. The groom was just sitting there, munching on his packed lunch. Lyndon was like, "Dude, you can't be eating right now. We gotta get ready for the wedding." And the groom goes, "I'm not even getting hitched. I never popped the question. She set everything up, picked the date, and told me to grab a suit." So the lady showed up at the church, and her car just kept circling around while she waited for the groom. This was back in the 80s, way before everyone had cell phones. I have no clue how she figured out he wasn't showing up, but by nightfall, everyone in town was already in the loop. Story 46. So, like 2 weeks before the big day, I called off my wedding. My ex was being all sneaky and cheating with just about anyone, guys, girls, whoever was down, I guess. He played it off like he was just nervous, but then one of the dudes he was messing around with hit me up with proof. After I pulled the plug on everything, he started stalking me for more than a year. I took action and got him in trouble, and now he's too freaked out about going to jail to even think about coming near me. Story 47. I heard about this girl who had a wild situation, but it didn't go down like you might expect. So this was a South Asian wedding with a bunch of events lined up throughout the day. On the day of the first event, they had a little get-together at the bride's house. The bride's younger sister needed a ride home from school, and since no one else was free, the bride decided to go pick her up herself. Unfortunately, on their way back, they ended up in an accident, and both of them didn't make it. It was super tough and hit everyone hard. That took a turn I didn't see coming. Like, I was all set for some wedding drama, but instead we're diving headfirst into a pickup gone wrong. It's always wild to me how fast things can change, especially when you just think you're doing a regular errand. If only we could predict life events like we predict the next TikTok trend, right? I guess we really never know what's around the corner. Story 48. It wasn't the big day yet, but we were super close. Church and priest were locked in, the reception spot was chosen, and all the invites were printed. After some serious thinking, I was like, nope, I'm bailing. I kept it cool with everyone, especially her family. They kind of saw it coming. Called her dad to let him know I'd cover the printing costs. Told my folks and all that. Honestly, it's one of the best choices I've ever made. Story 49. So, I have this second cousin, he's from the UK, who was super shy and kind of a geek. Not really the most self-assured dude. He snagged a scholarship and headed to college in the US, where he met this girl who ended up being his wife. Honestly, she was the only person I knew he ever dated. Her family was really into their faith, and her dad was like some kind of pastor, so they got engaged and married pretty quickly. On their wedding night, she dropped a bombshell on him. She was actually a lesbian and had feelings for her maid of honor. She asked if he could be her cover. Is there a term for that with girls? Because her family would totally kick her to the curb if they found out. She wanted this loveless marriage for show, but he thought they were all lovey-dovey and was totally caught off guard. He ended up annulling the wedding, and apparently her family really did disown her. It was all whispered about among my mom and aunties, super polite and very British. As a rebellious teen, I thought it was kinda wild, but looking back, I can only imagine how heartbroken he must have been. Story 50. So I almost went through with this. 2 days before the wedding, while my bridesmaids were flying in, my fiancé totally forgot his wallet at home. I've never been the snooping type, but I just had to peek inside. The very first thing that caught my eye was this bright yellow letter from his ex-wife. It was from when he was deployed. They had a kid together, but there was zero mention of the kid in that letter. I only skimmed through it, but it seemed like she was just trying to be nice and knew he loved getting letters, so she sent him one. Honestly, I was pretty bummed that it was important enough for him to keep on him every day. If it was tucked away in a drawer or a box, it'd be one thing. But to have it in his wallet all the time? Yeah, that stung a bit. Plus, I often wrote little notes about how much he means to me and hid them around, so her letter being in there and none of mine, that felt pretty crummy. He's usually a pretty quiet guy and didn't have much to say when I brought it up. I thought about just going through with the wedding and then not sending in the certificate later, but when he gave his vows, he totally nailed it. There wasn't a dry eye in the place. He even got down on one knee to my daughter, said some sweet vows to her, and gifted her some custom earrings. The wedding weekend was a total blast, and he looked genuinely happy to be marrying me. So I figured I could let it slide. It was a part of his life I couldn't really relate to, but we had this amazing blended family and could just move forward. I sent in the certificate after all. Fast forward, and we'll be celebrating 10 years of marriage this summer. We've had some bumps along the way, mostly that first year, but honestly, the last 4.5 years have been really great, and I'm so happy we're together.